Making ends meet can be a challenge at the best of times, but if you're struggling under a mountain of debt that you can't get out from under, what are your options? Doug Hoyes is a bankruptcy trustee with Hoyes, Michalos and Associates. Let's get right to our question, which is, how do you know when to declare bankruptcy? Welcome. What are kind of a red flag moment for people? If they, you will know if you're in debt, you'll know if you're struggling, but what are some of the signs to watch for?
Well, I think the first sign would be legal issues. If you're getting collection calls, if you're being threatened with wage garnishments, if your wages are actually being garnished, you've got a problem. That's not going to just go away on its own. I think another red flag would be the math. So if you're spending a big chunk of your income on your minimum payments each month, again, that's just not sustainable. If you're using a cash advance on one credit card to pay the minimum payment on the other, also not sustainable. I guess the third one would be stress. If you're thinking about it all the time, if it's affecting your relationships, your health, your work, then you've probably got too much debt and you've got to do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw you say if you avoid opening your mail, it's probably a sign that something's gone wrong.
Yeah, I think if your viewers turn around and look at their kitchen table right now and see a big stack of mail that they haven't opened, then they're obviously in denial. That's a problem. Yeah. You've got to deal with it.
So there are different routes that people can go down, and we should note that often people are embarrassed by being in financial straits, and they won't turn to some obvious routes. They'll ask friends and family for money to start a business, but they won't ask them for a hand out of a hole, which might be a first stop. Would you consider bankruptcy the last stop?
Yes, I would. I think you're right. You go through all the other options first. Can I fix this on my own? Can I cut my expenses? Have I got some assets that I could sell to use to pay down my debts? If I can't, then, and more particularly if you've got some of these legal issues like wage garnishments, then yes, you've got to be looking at something like a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal.
So I want to talk about the advantages and disadvantages, because there are some advantages. It feels like there are big long-term repercussions to bankruptcy, but so let's start with the advantage. What
the
works?
Big advantage is your debts are gone.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of it. So if your problem is I will never be out of debt, then bankruptcy is a way to eliminate it once and for all.
Disadvantage?
Well, the disadvantage is there's going to be a note on your credit report that's going to stay there for a period of time. Although I don't consider that a big disadvantage. If you've got so much debt that you can't pay it now, you probably can't borrow anything more anyways.
Yep.
And there are, you may lose some of your assets if you go bankrupt, and there may be a cost to it based on your income. But when you compare those costs to the amount of debt you've got, it's usually a no-brainer.
What is a consumer proposal?
It's a negotiated settlement that we make with the people you owe money to. So it's an alternative to bankruptcy. And in fact, in a number of provinces, including Ontario, there are more consumer proposals filed now than personal bankruptcies.
And is it the same kind of legal process, or
yes,
it's quite different?
Yes, no, it's a legal process. It's governed by federal law, the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act. And we go to the creditors and we say, hey, I don't want to go bankrupt, but I know that if I went bankrupt, I'd probably have to pay this much. If we offer them a little bit more than that, then in most cases they're going to agree to it.
Now, bankruptcy stage, I think it's a 7-year period at post-bankruptcy. Is that still true?
Correct. A first bankruptcy is going to be on your credit report for 6 years after you finish making your payments. So the minimum is 9 months, so that's where the 7 years comes from. A consumer proposal will have a note on your credit report in general for about 3 years after the final payment is made. So if you pay the consumer proposal off in one fell swoop, it's 3 years. If you take 5 years to make all the payments, it could be there for up to 8 years.
Are there some things you can't declare bankruptcy over, for instance, unpaid taxes?
No, taxes are included. Bankruptcy is governed by federal law, and fortunately, Canada Revenue Agency is part of the federal government. So they don't have any special way to get out of a bankruptcy. If you have excessive tax debt, you may have to go before a judge to get it discharged, but no, tax debt is included in a bankruptcy.
We don't have a ton of time, but going back to this notion that people feel shame about this, is there anything surprising about who falls into this category?
Everyone falls into this category. We're seeing more and more seniors who are getting into trouble. And I think it's because they've been the providers all their lives. They've never had an issue with it before. They become retired. They've got a fixed income. Now the expenses are squeezed and they look to debt to survive.
Doug, great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Doug Hoyes, bankruptcy trustee at Hoyes, Michalos.